Hi everyone, I'm Catherine Weaver, half of the team behind Tablet Weaving Draft Designer, or TDD for short. Today I'm going to be taking you through the different features that TDD has and how you can use them to design a draft. Firstly, I'm going to take you through this example draft. As you can see, the top part, the top rectangle, is the turning diagram. This explains step by step which tablet is turning forwards and which tablet is turning backwards for any given pick or row. And the backward turns are the squares with a dark or grey background. The forward turns have a light or white background. The rectangle, or in this case square at the bottom, is the threading diagram. This describes the colours that pass through each hole of each tablet. So for both of these, one column represents one tablet, and in the turning diagram, one row represents one pick. At the bottom of the threading diagram, we have the letters S and Z. So these represent the threading direction of a tablet. And in the threading diagram, we also have slanted ovals. Now, those ovals represent the warp alignment of the tablet. So let's go back to TDD. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is give this draft a name. So I'm going to go ahead and just call this example. Now, you don't technically have to name your draft. If you don't, when you save your draft or you export any pictures based on it, TDD will give it the name Untitled Draft. But if you have given it a name, that's the file name that TDD will make for you. Right, but firstly, let's go to controls. What we've got at the moment is the default. So that's one pick, one tablet, 4 holes, all the threads black, and Z threaded. So, well, let's increase the number of picks to start with. So I'm going to go with 10. Now you can do this by entering it using a keyboard, or you can do it by using the plus and minus buttons on either side. And I'm going to increase the number of tablets as well. Let's make that 10 as well. There. So if later on you decide you want to add more picks, TDD will add them to the top of your draft. And if you want to add more tablets, they'll be added on the right side of the draft. And if you add more holes to the tablet, they'll be added at the bottom. Right, now the next thing to go to is palette. And if you want to use the bare minimum of TDD's tools, controls and palette are the way to go. You don't technically have to use any of the other tools, but they are useful. Okay, so firstly, if we wove this band as it's written, we would have a nice, perfectly functional black band. But because all of the tablets are threaded in the same direction, when we take it off the loom or it's no longer under tension, it's going to coil back on itself like a spring. So to prevent that from happening, we can change the threading direction of some of the tablets. So I can do that by clicking on the Z underneath the tablets, or the S if it happens to be an S. So I'm going to change tablet 1, and I think I'm going to change tablets 6, 7, 8 and 9 as well. Now if we wove this band, it's going to be a lot less coiling when we cut it off, because we have areas where the twist is going in either direction. So that cancels out some of the energy that you get when you take it off the loom. Now, at the moment, everything is black, which is a bit boring. So I'm going to add some more colours. I feel like red Selvage is. That's the tablets on either side. There we go. So you change the colours of the threads in the threading diagram by clicking the colour that you want to use from the foreground colour. That will put a little black box around it, and then you click on the threading diagram on that particular oval. Now you'll notice that we've got some numbers underneath the colour boxes. Now those indicate the number of threads of that particular colour that are present in your turning diagram and threading diagram, or rather just your threading diagram, sorry. And that is really helpful when you're threading your tablets and setting up your loom, because it tells you how much of each colour you need to measure out. Now I'm also going to add some white as well, I think. So let's do that. And I've got a nice little arrowhead forming there, but I'm going to turn it into a chevron, a V shape. There we go. Now underneath the boxes you'll see colour name. So if I change that, yeah, so this one is called Dusty Grey. Now we get those colour names from an open source directory, and I'll come back to that when we look at the text description tool. Now if you find that you don't like any of the colours that we've got pre-arranged for you, you can change them. So you can do that by moving the sliders, or you can do it by changing the numbers by entering them with a keyboard. So at the moment that has changed it to a colour called Laser. And as you can see, when I change the colour that I have selected, if it's present in the threading diagram, it's going to automatically update the colour in the threading diagram as well. And I'm just going to take those back up to white because I don't think I fancy that Laser. Oh, and this one's Laser Lemon. Now the box at the very left of the foreground colour is None, and that sets all of the red, green, blue values to 0. And if I click on the threading diagram, as you can see, it leaves an empty box instead of a thread. And that's because this is to help with bands that are vacant whole. So that's where you have intentionally left one or more of the holes of a tablet empty. This is sometimes called missed hole, skip hole, skipped hole, and other variations. And as you see, the empty boxes are also in the turning diagram, and it just shows that there is going to be no thread at that point. So we could weave this as it is, and again that would make a perfectly fine band, but I'm going to add in some changes of turning direction as well. So in order to do that, I click on the square that I want to change, and that changes it from a white background and forwards turns to a grey background and backwards turns. And I'll do that at the top as well. Now, as you can see, we've got a red line in between the two colours of background. So talk about that, I will go to the display section. So we call those reversal points, as some weavers prefer to mark the point where the direction changes rather than the specific direction that the tablet's following. And if you don't want to include reversal points in your draft, you can just unselect the reversal point box. Now, Now, the rest of the display menu, we have show threads, which does what it says. You can choose to remove all of the thread ovals from the threading diagram and the turning diagram. Now, this is handy if you are making a large draft and there's a mistake in it somewhere and you're having trouble pinning it down. But if you remove the threads from the turning diagram, that allows you to see the pattern of the grey background squares more easily, and that can help you pin down the problem with the draft and fix it. And this is also useful if you're making a draft for brocade or for double face, as you want to record which threads would be the background colour and which threads would be the pattern colour for your band. So I'm going to turn the threads back on. So the next one is show threading diagram, and this is helpful if you've made a large number of drafts based on the same threading diagram. So because they all have the same threading diagram, you only really need to show it once. So by removing it from the further drafts after that point, you can save some space on your page. The next one to look at is show text description. So I'll scroll down for that one. So as you can see, each individual tablet is described. So the first tablet is an S-threaded tablet, and we have the name of each colour going into each hole and the hexadecimal code for them as well. So this is where the colour names from the palette comes in, because hexadecimal is a great way of describing colours, but it can be a little difficult to understand for the average person. And if you look at tablet number 2 in the threading diagram, you'll note that hole C is empty. And if we go to tablet 2 in the text description, we also have an empty marker for that hole. I'm going to continue scrolling down until we find the turning directions. Now, I know that some weavers prefer a set of written instructions rather than a pictorial representation. So this is to help those weavers. So it goes through the turning diagram pick by pick. So for the first 4 picks, every tablet is turning forwards. So 10 tablets forwards. Then from pick 5 onwards, the first tablet will turn forwards, then the next 8 turn backwards, and then the next one turns forwards. And we continue that for 8 picks, and then we go back to all of the tablets, the 10 tablets turning forwards. I'm going to turn off text description and take us on to visual scale. Now, just like with the other boxes, you can edit this using your keyboard, or you can edit it by clicking on the plus and minus buttons on either side. And visual scale changes the size of the draft on your screen. So if you'd prefer to have it a bit larger, then use the plus and minus buttons to do that. But if you are working with a very large draft, you might find it helpful to reduce the visual scale below 0, as this makes the draft on your page smaller, and that can help you see all of your draft at once if it's very big. So I'm going to change that back to 0 again. There we go. Now we also have the backward turn saturation slider. So this can help you change how dark the grey background backward turn squares are. So you can increase the saturation to make them darker. You can even go all the way up to black, but that makes the borders of the boxes invisible, so that's a little less useful. Or we can go all the way down to 0 and have all of the squares with white backgrounds instead. I'm going to set it back to about here, so that's about my comfortable level. Next, we're going to look at the rulers. So I will turn those on to start with, and we can move them around the page using the plus and minus buttons. Now, the horizontal ruler is a tool that I personally find incredibly useful because it means that I can mark my place in the draft when I'm weaving directly from my computer, so I don't have to print it out. So I put the ruler just below the pick that I'm about to weave, and then when I finish that pick, I click to move it up. We've also got the vertical ruler. So this one's helpful to place in the center of the draft if you are building a draft that has a central line of symmetry. And you can also use it to help you keep your place when you're threading your tablets. So after you thread each one, you can move it on, and it makes it easier to tell which one you're going to thread next. So I'm going to turn those off again. That brings us to repeats. So this is one of the most popular tools on TDD, and we do get quite a bit of feedback about it. I'll turn that on. Now, at the moment, we've told TDD that the repeat starts at pick 1 and finishes also at pick 1. So our repeat generated is only one pick. So I'm going to increase that to the 10 that we've got in our draft. There we go. So it's made a copy of the draft, but without any grey background squares. It would also not include any rulers or red reversal lines either. So I'm going to increase the number of repeats. Let's see what happens. Now this is telling me that I haven't set the number correctly for the size of the pattern repeat. So it's taken the sequence of turning from picks 1 to 10 and applied it to the threading diagram that we've given it. So looking at it, we're turning forwards for 4 picks, then backwards for 4 picks, and then forwards for another 2. So overall, that gives us 6 forward turns and 4 backward turns, which is why we're seeing this slight oddness going on here. So I'm going to edit the repeat end point, and you could increase it or decrease it depending on what your draft is like. So yeah, that's a bit closer to the diamonds that I was hoping this draft was going to produce. There we go. Yeah. So this is telling me that when I'm weaving it, I need to ignore picks 9 and 10 from that draft. Otherwise, it's going to end up looking like the first mock-up that we did. I'll turn that off again. Okay. And next we have the reset buttons. So we've got reset all and clear pattern. Reset all will take you all the way back to the beginning, where you've got one pick, one tablet, 4 holes, all threaded with black threads in the Z threading direction. And we don't have an undo function in TDD, so I would always recommend saving your draft before pressing that button if you want to press it. The other button is clear pattern. So as you can see, when I click that, it turned all of the picks in the turning diagram to forwards only. And that's helpful if you're making a draft and you want to go back to the starting point. Maybe you've made some mistakes and you want to undo them or come back to where you began. Or if you're generating a number of different drafts which have variations but the same threading diagram, so you can just go back to all forwards and start a new variation. So I'll go ahead and put the backwards turns back in. So I didn't talk about it earlier, but you can see that our Selvage tablets don't change turning direction at the same time as our pan tablets, the middle ones. And that's because I like to weave my bands with a continuous selvage. So the tablets controlling the selvage turn forwards continuously, no matter what the tablets in the middle are doing. And I do that because it gives me a really nice, strong, firm edge to the band, because every time you change the turning direction of the edge tablets, you get a little bump and a few loose threads where the threads skip over or under the warp when they wouldn't normally do. And that can give you kinks at the edges and make it a little less strong at those points. Then the next one to talk about is the export tool. So this is where we can tell TDD to make us a picture file of our draft or of the repeat for the draft. The first thing we need to do with this is tell it how big we want the picture to be. So if we wanted a resolution of 250 dpi or pixels per inch, and we wanted the picture to be 2 inches wide, we would do 250 times 2, which is 500, and enter that into the box there. And bear in mind that most computer screens aren't more than about 2000 pixels wide anyway. So to generate or export the picture file, you click on any of these 6 buttons depending on what it is you're wanting TDD to do. And it can export as scalable vector graphic, JPEG or PNG for both the draft and the repeat. I'm going to go ahead and click JPEG for the moment. As you can see, it's just downloaded into my browser the picture file of that draft, and it's used the name for the draft that we specified at the top. I can do the same with the repeat. So lastly, we have files. So we can click the Save button to save our draft as a TDD file that has the extension .tdd. Now, before the big update that we did at the end of 2020, we used a JSON format for the save files. Now, if you opened one of these up, it was pretty close to gibberish. So we've changed the save format to make it a lot easier to understand. Now, if you have some old TDD files in the JSON format, you can open them exactly the same as you did before using the Choose File button, and you can save them as the new TDD format. And we don't have any plans to remove this capability, so there's no rush to jump in and convert all your old files. So if I open up a file by clicking Choose File, now I don't believe that you get to see my computer's dialog box here, but there we go. So give it a minute, and there we go. So this is what I meant by a very large draft. So I will go in and reduce the size of this so you get a better idea of what's going on with it. There we go. So now that I've reduced the size, we're able to see more of the draft, and it's easier to tell what's happening with the pattern for it. Right, so I believe that's everything. So thank you for listening, everyone, and happy weaving.